You either use the internet for fun or you use the internet to grow. You're here to grow. Welcome to TRS Clips. You mentioned ganja as something that was used. I'll tell you what, all of India smokes weed now, especially younger India. Everyone smoked weed. I'll be surprised to find a college that doesn't have some weed consumption in India, which is why I always find it tricky to speak about weed on the show because I've been there myself. And every time I would find the internet validating something about weed, I would be more inclined to smoking it. So that's not my intention behind asking you this. I do not wish to validate the stoners who are listening to this podcast. And in saying this, what's the purpose of marijuana in Hinduism, in spiritual growth, and in Aghora specifically?
Well, I think we should first remember that cannabis grows all over the country. It grows wild. I spend a lot of time in Uttarakhand nowadays. It grows wild in Uttarakhand. So it is a plant. In Ayurveda, it's a very useful thing, especially for people who have whose digestive capability is disturbed in some way. Especially, like, for example, you've had parasites many times. So that it is a very good medicine if it's prepared correctly with other things added to it and consumed in the right amount.
Does it still get you high?
If you're eating it that way, usually not. But it's also something that has been traditionally used. It's been a traditional offering to Lord Shiva for a long time because he takes intoxicants. I remember, we're talking about probably almost 40 years ago, I had gone to Ujjain. Ujjain, one of the Jyotirlingas, is there, Mahakaleshwara. And so this was almost 40 years ago. Back then, there was not Jyotirlinga tourism and all the kind of stuff we have nowadays. So it was evening. There was almost no one in the temple. I walked into the temple, and there was the pujari, and he was covering the linga with a thick paste of bhang. And he was decorating it with some peanuts, some mungfali. It was very beautiful. I sat there, and then after a while of sitting there, and I was repeating a couple of things, he gave me a nice piece of bhang as prasad off the linga. So this is something that is traditional. Now, what would that bhang be meant for? That word bhang comes from the Sanskrit word bhanga. Bhanga actually means to break. What is it supposed to do? Break the connection between your awareness and your ordinary physical existence. So the point of taking bhang, for example, is to sit and meditate and allow your awareness to become the awareness of Shiva. The difference between bhang on the one hand and ganja or charas on the other hand is that bhang takes a longer time to come on and it lasts for a lot longer time. Charas and ganja, they come on much more quickly and the effect goes away more quickly. But charas and ganja are meant for the same thing. But it's also the case that whether you're taking any form of cannabis, the thing is that whatever is in your mind, that will continue to stay in your mind. So the only reason, and Vimalananda emphasized this repeatedly, the only reason to take these is to take them and then to sit down and meditate, to sit down and chant, to sit down and worship the fire or the water or whatever element you're worshiping. That is the only reason to take them, because otherwise they will simply get you more connected to whatever kind of thing you are addicted to.
Food or sex.
Whatever it may be, absolutely. Food or sex or sitting around and laughing at stupid YouTube videos or movies or whatever it may, anything.
This is where a lot of people get it wrong as well. They only associate pot with being a spiritual thing, but then they use it as an excuse to do non-spiritual things when they're high.
An excuse is still an excuse, no matter how good or bad the excuse may be. So whatever you use it for, it's going to encourage you to keep using it for that purpose.
How often would sadhus get stoned in order to meditate? Every day?
Some sadhus smoke every day.
Is that correct?
Correct is a big word. If some sadhus, that may be part of their sadhana. They may say, every day, this is what I need to do. I am making ganja my sadhana. Some sadhus may not do that. It depends on the person, but it has to be something that you know why you're doing it. You're doing it deliberately. And sometimes, of course, Vimalananda would, he would also use it as a way of experimenting with, somebody comes and thinks they can do something, and he would let them try something out and see whether they could do it or not. I remember once, we used to have a friend who I don't know what his name was. We called him China Sert. I think he was originally or part Nepali or something like that. So he looked vaguely Asian or Chinese. And he was in Sayan Koliwada. And he was regarded as being kind of a dada of some kind of a tough guy. And he was a nice guy overall. A couple of times he had brought Vimalananda a chillum that had some kind of extra visha, a little extra poison in it. Sometimes, like people into their chillum, they will add Datura. Datura, if you go to Benares, for example, you go to Vishwanath, you can buy Datura seed pods and offer them to Shiva. That's very dangerous. Datura, for some people, even one seed might kill them.
Have you tried
Datura? I have tried Datura. I don't like it. It depends. I mean, some people use Datura, but I remember asking a shaman in South America about Datura. He said, yeah, it's very useful, especially for finding things that have been lost. But he said she's a very jealous plant, meaning that once you start working with her, it's very hard to escape from it.
Yeah, you read all sorts of stories about Datura on the internet where they say that there's also a presence of a black dog in everyone's hallucinations. Is that true? And that's why they call it devil's weed.
That I don't know, but I do know people who have taken it, enough to really have it take over their awareness. They say that the it will look exactly like reality, except there will be some fuzziness at the edges. That's the only way you can tell it's
what
not
had
reality.
happened to you?
Well, I just took a small amount, and I didn't take it internally. I smoked it, and so I could tell. I mean, you can kill yourself with it, and people become permanently insane from it. So I could tell that it was a very poisonous thing. You have to know what. I feel good about arsenic. I didn't feel good about Datura. You have to know what poisons you feel good with.
You had done this with Vimalananda?
I actually did it afterwards.
Okay. What do you
He
remember?
never used Datura. He would use other things. I mean, once he gave me some snake venom that had been prepared in a particular way.
Really?
That was very interesting. That had an effect for like 24 hours. I can't even describe what it was like, but it was just very interesting. It was snake reality.
Snake reality?
Yeah, it's like you were seeing the world from the eyes of a snake. It was very unusual.
Which is what?
That's why I say I can't. I mean, it's hard to. You can if you could get into the body of a reptile and see through the eyes of the reptile. It's like you're seeing. Reptiles are not emotional things. They're just very basic reality connected to this is what I'm going to do. There's nothing about emotion. It's just very matter of fact.
Very much like an Agori.
Very much like an Agori. So yeah, I mean, so anyway, there was this China set, and he had brought a couple of times, not just once, a couple of times he had brought a chillum to Vimalananda that had some other kind of poison in it. I don't know what it was, but Vimalananda smoked the chillum, and China Set got the effects of the poison. So I would have thought that once would have been enough to convince him, but he did that twice. After that, he realized that was not a good idea. So he would just bring, standard charas with him. So I remember, I think probably because it is my habit to self-importance is a problem that I've had my entire life. So I was probably thinking that, yes, I know how to handle this charas. So, this day, whichever it was, we were going to drop Chinaset back in Sayankoliwada. And this was, of course, 40 years ago. And there was not the Eastern Freeway, and there was not, there was the chillum, and we all smoked it. And then Vimalananda said, okay. And we went down to his car, and then he handed me the keys and said, now you drive. So now I've just smoked this chillum with all this charas in it. And now I was driving in Bombay anyway, but now it's a bigger challenge to drive. And both he and Sheena said are expecting that I'm not going to crawl down Muhammad Ali Road, but that I'm going to drive like I know what I'm doing. So now I have the pressure of them both paying attention to me and the pressure of the charas, which is, and so it was an educational experience and a good reminder not to think too much of my capabilities. And it was a good lesson. Okay. And thank God Vimalananda was along with me, but I got there and everything was fine. And China said was duly impressed. And so that worked well.
I'm still stuck on the snake venom, so gotta understand a little bit more about it because
Vimalananda, he used to, and I know there were people who used to do this, but I never met anyone who did it except him, and he never volunteered to show me how to do it, and I'm not willing to do it otherwise. He used to get a cobra, milk out most of the venom, and then let the cobra strike him on the tongue. And so most of the effect of the venom would go directly into the brain. Obviously, that's a really dangerous thing to do, but that's something he did because he wanted to know the effect. He made it a point to try things out just to the point where he knew what the effect was. And then he said, if I do it anymore, there's too much danger that I'm going to become habituated to it. Then he would drop it and move on to the next thing. But he was always trying new things whenever there were new things to be tried.
That's a part of being an Aghori?
For him, that wasn't a part of being an Aghori. And I believe that is very much a part of being an Aghori because it's things that come to you. You need to know what they are. You need to know. As he put it, it's the law of the jungle. It either kills you or you kill it. Every time I used to, his favorite intoxicant was scotch. And when he would drink scotch, he would become more and more sharp and what he would talk would become more and more sophisticated and abstruse.
The reason I'm hesitant about having this free-flowing conversation with you is there's a lot of people who watch this and think that drinking scotch equals spiritual growth.
And one of the first things that happened after Agora was first published almost 40 years ago in the US is somebody sent a letter to the publisher. Back then we had to use snail mail. And the letter said, please send the mantra for controlling alcohol. Do not do this unless you have someone guiding you. And that was very much his point.
I believe in Tantra of any form, when you're using intoxicants, there's a huge ritual that happens upon those intoxicants before you consume them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Which may have an effect on your body, it may have an effect on the intoxicant.
And that's why I think I said earlier, but if not, I'm saying right now, do not go out and try this stuff. If you're meant to do it and you have the intention, someone will come to you, maybe in this lifetime and maybe not, and someone will tell you the right things to do. And that may not be what you imagine. Yeah. You may be thinking, I will start drinking scotch. And the guru will come to you and say, under no circumstances drink alcohol ever. And then what? Then your idea will no longer, you will either have to think, oh my God, but I know that I could achieve this without, but number one is you need a mentor. You need a guide. You will get lost otherwise. Many people have gotten lost. Many people are getting lost. Nowadays, for example, people are taking ayahuasca And so many people think they have become shamans and they can distribute ayahuasca. And so many people think that they can take ayahuasca and they know what they're doing. But that doesn't mean they know what they're doing. This applies to anything that will disconnect you from your current present time reality. Only take it if you have a guide. And it has to be a legit, not just somebody who thinks they're a guide, somebody who is a real. How will you know if they're a real guide? Well, you need to be able to find that out. How will you find that out? That's a good question. That's something, there is no one pariksha, no one test you can use to figure out whether someone is legitimate. You have to be able to, or as Vimalananda used to say, suppose you want to know whether some swami or some sadhu or some yogi is legitimate. It's up to you to be able to have the perception of them. Don't expect that they are going to, because anyone will say, I have achieved this. Whether or not they've achieved that, you don't know, and possibly they don't know. But he used to say that, any fool can tell the difference between the smell of the gutter and the smell of attar. But just because you can know what is the difference between badbu and khushbu, between something that smells that is a stench and something that is a fragrance, that's all that means. After you have learned a little bit, you'll be able to tell whether that fragrance is rose or jasmine or agar or whatever it may be.
Okay.
But even then, just because you know it's rose, that doesn't mean you will know whether it's the highest quality of rose or whether it's rose plus rose geranium or something else. You have to have enough experience to know what that person is about before you personally can conclude that what they're saying is accurate or not.
New clips released at the same time that a podcast releases. This is TRS Clips. Make sure you subscribe.